So today I thought we'd look a little bit at the core and introduce some just basic conditioning of the deep core. We've talked before of our deep core consisting of the pelvic floor, the transversus muscle which wraps like a corset around our abdomen, and then our diaphragm sits at the top of this deep core. And those muscles need to work in coordination with each other to manage intra-abdominal pressure and help stabilize the lumbar spine. So what we want to be aware of is whether we are, when we're doing these exercises, overusing our obliques, our internal or external obliques, or our rectus, and creating some trunk flexion or fixing. We want during these exercises to allow the breath to drive the movement, and when we breathe in, we want the waist and the pelvic floor to be allowed to widen so we can breathe down into our abdomen. And on the exhale, we want to try and gather up through the pelvic floor and get a sense of narrowing front to back, side to side, as we create that wrap with our transversus, rather than a sense of gripping and fixing and closing down the front of our body, which means we're using the more superficial abdominal muscles. So we're just going to go very gently, and I'm going to start in standing. But before I do that, I just want to say an overball can be really useful. I'm going to use it with one of the squat exercises between the knees, but if you don't have one, a cushion is absolutely fine. And then when we come down to the floor to do some work in a bit, again, I might use the overball between the knees because it's a useful prompt for adduction, to help increase your pelvic floor and transversus recruitment. And we'll also use it behind our back with some abdominal work when we start to layer on the more superficial muscles. So we can play with that, but if you don't have that, you can use either a cushion, and then when we lie on the overball later with it behind our back, you could use a cushion, or you can use a rolled up blanket or towel. If you know you have a pokey chin, then have a folded towel or a small head cushion for you for some head and neck support. But if you know you're fine without, then that's great. So those are the pieces of possible equipment. I'll get rid of the blanket because I don't need it. I don't use head cushions, but I'll leave them there as a reminder. And we'll come up into standing, and we'll use this one in a little bit. But to start with, I just want you to stand and place a hand on the front, and then I've got the back of my hand against the back of my waist, because this just acts as a little bit of biofeedback. We're going to just breathe in and out. I want you to make sure your shoulders are relaxed, and I want you to make sure your tripod feet are grounding into the floor. And as you breathe in and out, I want you to feel your waist expanding both forwards and backwards into the hand behind you. So I don't want you just to collapse into your belly. I want you to have a gentle expansion in 360 degrees of the waist. But we've got a hand placed on the front and the back. You could also have a go with feeling the hands side to side. And again, you want to feel the expansion on the exhale and the softening back in on the expansion on the inhale and the softening back in on the exhale. Keeping that small relaxed breathing, feeling those gentle movements of expansion as you breathe in and recoil as you breathe out. We're going to add a little bit more of an active exhale. So you're going to breathe in and soften into the 360 degree waist, and also try to draw the breath down into the pelvic floor space. And then as you exhale, I want you to think of gathering up through the pelvic floor and wrapping in front to back, side to side of your waist. It's really important that we're not collapsing or pulling down with the more superficial muscles, and that we're just gathering in, breathing in and breathing out, gathering in the pelvic floor and the waist as you exhale. Breathing in to soften and breathing out, gathering everything in. So throughout the breath, there is no fixing or holding. There is a constant movement of your waist and the pelvic floor. As you breathe in, the pelvic floor will drop down a little bit, and as you exhale, it will lift back up. And the same is happening with the diaphragm. The diaphragm descends as you breathe in, and it recoils up as you breathe back out. And the waist is expanding 360 degrees in, and then narrowing back in as you breathe back out. So you're wanting that lovely, continual, gentle movement through your waist. So you're not fixing, gripping, grabbing, and you're not just collapsing. So there's a little bit of control. So then we'll do a wide, gentle squat, and you're thinking of the same things. As you breathe in, 360-degree expansion down through the waist, and as the diaphragm descends, the pelvic floor is also widening. And as you breathe back out and push up, you're zipping up, gathering in, but you're not collapsing and gripping. You're just narrowing your waist. Breathing in, expanding the waist. Breathing down. Breathing out, narrowing the waist and lifting up. Breathing in. Breathing out. Being aware of that movement of air. Breathing in, breathing down. And breathing out, lifting back up and narrowing in. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in. Try and make the core drive the exhale as you push back up. Breathing in, softening through, and breathing out. And then we're going to go to a regular squat, which you just going down into this position and pushing back up. And what can be a useful addition is a ball between your knees. So as you breathe in, your sit bones widen, your pelvic floor widens, your waist is expanding. And push through the heels to come up, and I want you to gently squeeze in on the ball, lifting through the pelvic floor, narrowing in your waist on the exhale. Breathing in, creating space in your waist and your pelvic floor. Breathing out, lifting the pelvic floor, narrowing in the waist. Breathing in and breathing out. And breathing in and breathing out. Making the waist active. Breathing out. Breathing in, softening on the inhale, and wrapping on the exhale. Softening on the inhale, wrapping on the exhale. One more. Breathing in and breathing out. So that starts to familiarize you with that pattern of movement of air through the breath. So we're going to come down onto hands and knees now and do another exercise we've done before, leg pull prep in prone. So you can just do it in this position in 4-point kneeling, toes tucked under in a minute when we go to do this exercise. You can add the ball between the knees if you found that gentle squeeze on the ball helped with the recruitment of your wrapping and your pelvic floor lift. So that can be quite beneficial. The other thing to do, just in this position before with the feet untucked, is just to find your breath like we did in standing. So find that breath as you breathe in, you're breathing and the diaphragm is descending and the pelvic floor is slightly gently widening. And then as you exhale, you'll think of lifting up through the pelvic floor, wrapping and narrowing your waist front to back, side to side. Breathing in, expanding 360-degree waist and down into the pelvic floor. And exhaling, lifting through the pelvic floor and wrapping 360 degrees around the waist. Breathing in and exhaling. So once you've found that movement pattern, you can tuck your toes under, taking your breath into the waist, down into the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, find that lift and wrap, squeezing the ball and hover the knees. Breathing in to lower back down and soften through the waist and pelvic floor. Exhale, wrapping, engaging as you hover the knees. Breathing in. Inhaling, softening, widening. So you start to really notice that minutiae of the waist expanding and contracting at the deepest level. To start with, you might find it hard to feel, but the more you practice, you'll get better at feeling it. The most important thing you'll notice is that my spine shape is not changing when I'm lifting and lowering. So what I'm not doing is collapsing into a rounded back to lift, because that requires a lot of gripping from my more superficial core, my obliques and my rectus, and I don't want to do that. I want to engage my transversus. So I want to keep my spine long and strong and just work with the breath. So I'm working with the diaphragm and then the transversus and then the pelvic floor. expanding 360 degrees as the diaphragm descends down towards the pelvic floor. Exhaling, finding that wrap of the core and hovering the knees throughout the exhale. And then as you start to inhale, lower the knees back to the floor. And then exhaling and inhaling. Now, to start with, it's really important to move the lift with the exhale when you're needing that core support, and then inhale as you relax back to the floor. Once you feel you've got that core strong, you can hover and continue that breath pattern. So you start to load the muscles a little bit more. So you're still, as you breathe in, there should still be expansion, but it's a very controlled expansion. And then as you exhale, you can increase the contraction again. But as you breathe in, you don't want to fix and grip. You want to allow the diaphragm to descend and the waist to expand, but it will be much more controlled. And you'll breathe much more into the back of your body than into the front. So we'll just do a couple of those, taking a breath in, starting to exhale, wrapping the abdominals, squeezing on the ball, holding. Then we want to breathe here, feeling a 360-degree gentle expansion. And then breathing out, exhaling, gathering in the pelvic floor and the waist. Breathing in, expanding gently. Breathing out, gathering in. One more breath. Breathing in and exhaling. And breathing in to lower. And sit back into child's pose. You can keep the ball there and just release your head and neck down. And then we're going to roll onto our backs, and I'm just going to use the overball or a rolled up blanket, if that's what you've got, to just facilitate some core work in a little bit more of an extended position. So this time we'll be adding on your rectus and your obliques to the movement. So you're going to place your hands behind your head, and the ball should be inflated to a level where you can relax over the top of it and let your head relax back to the floor. Your head is cradled with your hands and your elbows are lifted a little bit so you can see them in your peripheral vision. So from here we're going to draw our bodies back up, but this needs to come from the bottom of the rib cage, pulling yourself up and down. And I want you to do it with an exhale. So you'll inhale as you lower back, and then you'll exhale, find those bottom ribs and pull yourself up from the bottom of your rib cage. Breathing in as you lengthen those muscles, and exhale as you pull yourself back up. Breathing in, lengthen those muscles, and breathing out, exhaling. Now what you should notice is my head and neck, although it's moving with my body, it's not leading or pulling or pushing. My head and neck is staying in exactly the same position, and all that's happening is I am shortening the distance between my bottom ribs and my pelvis, and then lengthening the distance between my bottom ribs and my pelvis, and then shortening the distance between there as I engage the core, the more superficial abdominal muscles. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to pull yourself up with your head and neck and lower down, because then your bottom ribs, you won't feel any work. You're just using your shoulders to pull you up and let you down. It's a totally different exercise. So I want the head and neck to be the passengers, and you're engaging from the bottom of your rib cage, pulling towards your pelvis and breathing in to lengthen. So when you lengthen, you're eccentrically lengthening, so you're not just collapsing over the ball, you're letting the muscles lower your head back towards the floor. So you're breathing in, but your head, your tummy's still engaged because it's lengthening you back. So the slower you do these movements, the more you might feel, because you're really focusing on the contraction and then the lengthening of those muscles. With the exhale as you come up and the inhale as you go back. And then you can add a little bit more oblique work by coming up and then rotating. So when I rotate, I'm drawing the ribs on this. When I go towards the camera, my left hand rib cage is rotating towards the right hand pelvis, So I'm working that diagonal. Breathe in and lengthen slowly back. Then as I start to exhale and come up, I'm then going to rotate the right hand rib cage towards the left pelvis. Breathing in and back. Breathing out and up. Breathing in and back. I'm working slowly with gentle, soft, slow breaths. I'm trying to make, other than my elbow moving around, I'm trying to make the lift and rotation come as much from my bottom ribs and let my head and shoulders follow. I'm trying not to. I'm going to give you a demonstration after this rep. So I could pull myself up with my left arm and shoulder and pull my elbow across. And that's all working from my neck and shoulder. I don't want that to happen. I want the neck and shoulder to follow, and I want you to feel like you're pulling across with your rib cage, not with your neck and shoulder. And then you should really start to feel the work around here. We're going to sit forwards and we're going to take the ball out and we're going to come back onto our backs, and we're just going to do a scissors exercise, which is a lovely exercise which just works the stability of your core whilst you're moving your legs. So really important for locomotion. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a breath. As you breathe out, I want you to get that sense of wrapping your core, lifting your pelvic floor like we did in standing and in leg pulling prone just now. And you're going to float one leg up with that gentle contraction. Then you're going to breathe in and let the abdomen soften. And then you're going to breathe out and gather it in as you float the other leg back up. Now take a couple of breaths here and see if you can breathe in and widen gently. Breathe out, gather back in with the pelvic floor as well. Breathing in, widen. Breathing out, gather back in. Now if that feels too difficult, go down to having both legs on the floor. Take a breath, breathe out, float one leg up. Breathe in to lower it down. Breathe out, float the other leg up. Breathe in to lower it down. But every exhale, you're wrapping as you float, then you're softening as you inhale. As you exhale, you wrap, and then you soften on the inhale. And that might be enough load for your abdomen at the moment, if you feel that you can't keep that control. If you feel happy up here with that breathing exercise we've tried, you can then breathe in, widen through the waist and pelvic floor. And then as you breathe out, wrapping from the pelvic floor through the waist and then tapping one toe. Breathing gently in to soften. Breathing out to exhale down. Breathing in to soften. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. Breathing out. So what you want to be feeling is the control and the wrap of the abdominals as you exhale down, and then a gentle softening into your back and waist as you inhale to release. Exhale as you load the abdominals, inhale as you release the tension. Exhale as you load them, inhale as you come back. Exhale to load, inhale to come back. And then after a number of reps, depending on your endurance and strength, you'll start to feel like you're fatiguing. At that point, just bring your knees into your chest, take the weight and load off those abdominals and just let them fully relax. You can rock your hips from side to side. You can draw some circles with your knees. And then to finish off, just place your feet back on the floor, place your arms out and just let your knees turn. So you're rotating, turn your head the opposite direction to your knees, loosening off, letting go of your waist, letting the muscles lengthen and stretch. Breathe down into your abdomen all the way down to your pelvic floor. Breathing out to come back up and over. Again, finding that lovely length through your abdomen. Breathing all the way down into the bowl of your pelvis. And breathing out to come back. And if that felt good, you can do a number of reps of those knee rollings. But that just gives you a little bit of a core workout. And making sure that you're engaging your deep core before you then layer on the more of the traditional abdominal work. Because if you're not engaging your pelvic floor and deep core before you start adding obliques and rectus work, you end up bearing too much pressure down in your abdomen, which can then cause pelvic floor dysfunction longer term. So we want to make sure we've got the deepest core working well and in a coordinated fashion with the breath, so that we can manage pressure internally, so we can then start to load it without any problems. So have fun with that, and we'll see you again soon.